Hey guys, how you doing? First of all, to all fathers who are watching, wish you a very happy Father's Day. And on occasion of this day, I decided to put together a list that is the top 5 father roles in Malayalam cinema. I'm looking at the character arc, memorability, and the dynamic between the father and the children for this list. So without further ado, let's get started. Number 5 on my list is Anyuran Modulali, played by N. Pilla in the movie Godfather, released in 1991, written and directed by Siddiq Lal. Now, this movie is fondly remembered as one of the best comedies produced in Malayalam cinema. It is also the longest running Malayalam cinema in movie theatres. I believe it's 410 days, and that record has still not been broken to this day. Now, I know many would argue that Anyuran Modulali is not exactly a good father figure. In fact, there is a scene in the movie where his youngest son, played by Mukesh, who plays the character of Ramabhadran, he actually bursts out in it's a bit of a heavy drama scene, over there, and he bursts out, in protest and in anger and frustration. He says, do you consider all of us as sons, or are we your gundas, who are supposed to go fight or beat up people based on your instructions? And to a large extent, that's the kind of character Anyuran Modulali is. He's like that old feudal lord, with slaves, and who exercises his power exercises influence and power as like a god figure. And you can see shades of that in the movie as well. But most people don't seem to understand something. Anyuran's character, the way it's written, he doesn't show a lot of emotion with respect to his sons or how he feels about certain situations. The only moment in the movie where he is a little soft or a little emotional, I would say, is when his lawyer asks him, can't you forget everything and move on? And he says, what should I forget? Should I forget what they did to my Lakshmi, And Lakshmi is his wife, and as per the story, Lakshmi, his wife, was killed by Anapara Chamma's husband, and as a result, there's an enmity between the two families. In retaliation, Anapara Chamma's husband is murdered by Anyuran. He goes to jail, and he's all the more bitter when he comes out, and he has sown vengeance and absolute enmity and hatred against the Anapara family. So that's mainly the plot point, and you see as the story progresses. But the point really being, as a father figure, he's kind of not really very close with his sons. He's again taken on that role where he gives his instructions and his sons has to obey him. In fact, his sons are not even married, and he's not encouraging them to get married. In fact, he doesn't care. That's the kind of attitude he maintains throughout the movie. And I believe the bitterness of why he is the way he is because I believe Lakshmi, the character, we don't see her, but the way he's performed that role and way it's written, my interpretation of the character and how the story progresses is that he, of course, was a certain type of a feudal lord, or he's very cold, he's very harsh with the people around him. So I believe Lakshmi, his wife, was the only woman who kind of saw him for who he was, accepted him for who he was, and of course loved him. And when she died, he realized that he didn't have that acceptance and love anymore. His sons, of course, fear him, and hence they listen to him. But the fact remains that he doesn't know that if they love him, that really, I believe, is the reason why the character is the way he is. But towards the end of it, you see that Ramabhadran, in spite of his father behaving the way he is, he's ready to give up, his love for that in that movie. The girl he loves, he's ready to not marry her just to protect or save the integrity or the dignity of his father, because of the reasons in the story. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But he's ready to give up all that for his father. And at that moment, he realizes that his sons do really love him, especially his youngest son, who did question him, that does he really love them, or we gundas? In the end of the movie, you see that his younger son telling him that I'm ready to give all this up because for you, I want to protect your name, and I do love you. That moment over there, that's when he realizes that his sons do love him, and he is still accepted. I mean, that's the way I've interpreted that character, and many people don't see that. I just don't know why. Many people don't see or seem to understand that. So in the end, when he goes back home, he's got a board outside his house, no women allowed. So when he goes to his house, right, his children and their wives, they come with him, and first thing he does is he takes off that board and he throws it away. He picks up his granddaughter and he helps them and he tells, come on in kids, and they all enter the Anjuran household. The end, happy ending. So a memorable character, and actually a character with quite a character arc also. The movie's title, Godfather, for most intents and purposes, Mukesh is seen as sort of the protagonist of the movie, but I still believe Godfather, Anjuran Mudalali is the real protagonist, and his character arc was the most important character arc in that movie. So definitely a memorable role, and one of my favorite top 5 father roles in Malayalam cinema. Number 4 on my list is Unnikrishnan, played by Mohanlal in the movie Pavitram, released in 1994. Now this is a very serious family drama, but the highlight of the movie is Mohanlal's performance. So technically speaking, Mohanlal is not actually the father over here. However, the story goes that his parents at a very old age has a daughter, and due to complications his mother passes away, and his father due to certain issues leaves town, and he's never heard from again. So Mohanlal has to basically raise a sister who's kind of 27-30 years younger to him. So because of that age gap, and because he raises his sister, she sees him. In fact, I believe in the movie also there's a scene where she says, even though he's my brother, the kind of role he has in my life, or the position that he has in my mind, is that of a father. His sister's character was played by Vinduja Menon, and her character is called Meenakshi. Now this movie hasn't really aged well. If you were to watch it today, you would call it regressive, because there are several politically incorrect statements, there are several cliches, people who are not from the village, or who have accepted the modern way of living, or who are from town are supposedly the bad guys, who do not have any kind of family values, they don't care about relationship, etc, etc. So certain cliches and certain regressive outlook exists in this movie. However, the highlight over here is the dynamic between Unnikrishnan and Meenakshi. You see, Unnikrishnan's character had everything set for his life, his future, the girl he wanted to marry, his parents, his job. Everything was just ready for him. And then the birth of his sister happens, and he loses everything. His mother dies during the course of pregnancy. His father leaves town. The love of his life, played by Shobana, is ready to still marry him, but her father objects to it, says that he has the responsibility of raising a child right now. Even though it's his sister, it will come in between them during the marriage when they have children. He then privately goes, sees Unnikrishnan, and says that I don't want to send my daughter to a home where my son-in-law has to raise a sister. And also the shame, because like I said, the story is taking place within a village. They have certain regressive attitudes, and there is a lot of gossip and a lot of ridicule aimed at his family, because parents had this daughter basically in the old age. So all of this happens to him, and finally he's left with just a sister to raise. He's lost everything else. So basically he gives up everything, and he decides to stay back in this village. And his sister becomes the center of his life, and as a result he kind of becomes obsessed with her future and how he wants to raise her, because he's basically lost everything, and that's all he has to worry about. So it's an interesting character arc for Mohanlal's character Unnikrishnan, and Mohanlal's performance. This is why I think Mohanlal in the 90s was kind of unbeatable. The way he's handled the character, you can see the transition happening when they've gone to especially when you see him in the beginning as Unnikrishnan, where he's younger, a little more carefree, courting his girlfriend, etc. We see that, and then the older version of Mohanlal, and when he has to look after his sister, he's sort of the father figure in her life. He's got responsibilities. I believe he's running a sort of a catering business of sorts within the village that he is residing in. So he's a lot more mature. His whole body language changes also, how he handles the character. One of those very finest performances Mohanlal has given, I believe. Definitely in the top 10 for me. But for some reason or the other, Pavitra, no one really talks about his performance in this movie. I believe he did a great performance. And then there's a character arc of Meenakshi, played by Vinduja. Like, she was raised in the village, and finally, because she's doing well, she goes off to college, and she goes off into the city, where she comes across different culture, different attitudes, different people, and she's quickly taken by it. When she's completely fascinated by this, it's a change from the village, and it's basically she discovers a bigger world, and of course and she's a beautiful girl, so she gets offer for modeling, all of which creates a little bit of insecurity for Mohanlal's character also. So there's a great dynamic between them going on as well. There are certain regressive elements in the movie, like I said, but overall the character between them, how the story progresses, it's excellent storytelling, all of which leads to a heartbreaking climax where Vinduja's character Meenakshi has an accident, Unnikrishnan witnesses, and Vinduja is in the hospital. She gets better, and she comes back to see him. But then you have the big climax. The performance that Mohanlal gives in that climax, I'm telling you, every time I see this movie's climax, I break into tears. I have no shame in admitting that Mohanlal just is too good in the ending scene, because what happens is, because he witnessed this her accident, he believes she passed away or she died, and the accident is kind of accidentally caused by Mohanlal's character also in that scene, how the story or how that scene plays out. So when she and it's a big suspense, you don't understand what's happening. So Meenakshi, after the accident, she comes to see Mohanlal's character. She was in the hospital, she gets better, and she comes back to see him, and come over there, and Unnikrishnan has gone insane. The shock of seeing that accident, thinking that he had lost her, it's not something that he can take, especially thinking that he caused the accident. So he can't recognize her, and I don't know how to explain it. Even now, when I think of the performance Mohanlal gives, it's incredibly shocking for me, because how he performed that role and how it was handled and how it was presented to the audience, especially the first time you see, it's kind of played off as a suspense. Everyone's waiting for Mohanlal's reaction when he finally sees Vinduja, and she gets out of the car and she sees him and she calls him, and he looks at her, and he can't recognize her, and everyone's confused, and it's like, what happened? And then he and he's mumbling to himself, where is she, where is that little girl, and everything. And then two small children are walking by. He runs to them and he asks, where is Meenakshi? And at that point, everyone realizes that he couldn't take what happened to her, and sought, because he's gone insane, in his mind, Meenakshi is still a small kid. So he's asking children, where is Meenakshi? Because he wants to see his little sister, or at this point, again, it's his daughter, right? I mean, at least that's the way he sees her. So he's angry that she's late. He's talking to small kids over there. At that point, even KP Siladda has a great character arc also over there. She breaks out in tears, and Vinduja breaks out in tears, and Mohanlal comes back, and he's still mumbling, and the way his body language and everything changes, and he comes back and he sits down, and he's got a reclining chair of sorts, that old, I don't know how to call it, that old reclining chair where you keep your legs apart, right, and you sit back. So he's got that chair, and he's sitting over there, and he's mumbling still, let her come here, and he's got the small stick in his hand, ready to give her a little beating and a little scolding and everything, and he's like getting angry. And Vinduja comes right next to him, and she sits next to him, and she cries, and she's holding on to him. And at that point, I believe the idea is sort of like, with everything that has happened, he raised her and he looked after her. So at that point, I think they're communicating that now the sister is going to look after the brother. A heartbreaking ending, but a truly remarkable performance and a very memorable father role in Malayalam cinema. Number 3 on my list is Balachandran or Balu, played by Mammootty, in the movie Pappida Sondam Appus, released in 1992, written and directed by Fasil. Now, this is one of my all-time favorite Mammootty movies, and also one of my all-time favorite Mammootty roles as well. This movie also is sort of the on-screen debut of Fahad Fasil and Farhan Fasil. They have minor cameos in a song sequence and in a party sequence, basically. It's just, I think it's one scene or something, but if you watch the movie, you can see that. Now, coming to this movie itself, it's a great character for Balu, played by Mammootty. Initially, he starts off as a father who sort of neglects his son. He's a bit of a workaholic and kind of an alcoholic also. And you see the son played by Master Badusha at the time. And he's sort of alone because his father is extremely rich. So he's sort of alone in this house, looked after by his servants. And he gets into various, he's a bit of a brat. He gets into various trouble, sort of because he wants wants the attention of his father, but his father, like I said, is kind of neglecting him. And Shobana again plays the wife of Mammootty's character, and she kind of she passed away. And so what his son does is that he watches old cassette tapes of his mother singing and taking care of him when he was a baby at that point. This movie has great music, great cinematography, written well, directed well, great performances. It also has a great cameo by Suresh Gopi in the role of Dr. Goban. Solid performance over there, and it's quite memorable. Great songs, like I said, so many memorable songs, legendary songs, like Balago Balanenda So in the beginning, you kind of feel resentful towards Mammootty's character. Like I said, he's a workaholic, he's alcoholic, he's kind of neglecting his son, he's not paying attention to him, what he's doing. Every time his son gets in trouble, he scolds him, and at the same time his son says, I think he hates him or doesn't want to see him, things like that. So there's a big emotional scene where Mammootty sort of says, like, his son reminds him of his wife, and he was kind of a workaholic with his wife as well. He couldn't give her the attention that she wanted, and unfortunately she had cancer, I believe, and when that happens, he couldn't be there for her. So finally when she gets sick, that's when he sort of gives her the attention that she wants, but it's too late by then, and she passes away. So every time he sees his son, it reminds him of the time he couldn't give to his wife, and he feels extremely sad and depressed about it. So that's kind of the reason why he threw himself into his work after the passing of his wife, and therefore that's why he's staying away from everything. And it all changes when a girl comes along who he hires a sort of a nanny to look after his son. And again, great music again, because I want to really talk about the music. I believe Ilayaraj composed the music for this movie. Very memorable songs over here in this movie. It's also extremely funny. There are a lot of jokes, but at the end of it, it's a father-son drama that's done really well. Master Badusha and Mammootty's chemistry is just incredibly perfect and very, very natural. You really bind to the fact this is really a father and son, sort of dealing with certain struggles and certain difficulties in their lives, and going on and then overcoming those difficulties. Mammootty is just spectacular in the role of Balu or Balachandran, whether he's being the headstrong businessman who kind of ignores his son because he can't face the pain, or at the same time, kind of accepting the fact that his son needs him. At the same time, he's there's an interesting dynamic between the new nanny, who's a very young girl, and Mammootty as well, because she's trying to seduce him. It's a good mix of humor, it's a good mix of drama, and also it's kind of a family drama, right? You can I remember watching this with my family. I was very young at that point, but I remember watching this, having a good time. And I watched it when I got older as well, seen this movie multiple times, and really enjoyed it. I can't think about Mammootty's characters. I just can't imagine anyone else doing that role as the father over there. He's not perfect. He's flawed in many ways. At the same time, the redemptive arc also, there's a redemption over there, how he kind of overcomes all his certain insecurities and fears, and then kind of get closer to his son. So the beginning, he saw a cassette with his mother singing the song so when they kind of sort out these issues towards the end, Mammootty's character also, not towards the end, I think in the final 30 minutes or so, him and his son, they've kind of resolved their issues, and he's taking care of his son like his mother used to, and he's singing he starts singing the song. Very memorable scene, but then something happens, and it's all building. It's like it's almost building to a very heartbreaking, tear-filled climax. And I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, no, I hope it doesn't happen. But there's also, I remember, the scene that really stands out for me, there's a song called Snehathin Punjola, sung by KJ Yeshudas. The visuals of that song is still etched in my brain. It's basically his son is sick and he could die. It's not exactly sick, he kind of get into an accident, but the main thing over there is that he could die. So since Mammootty couldn't spend a lot of time with him, it's sort of like, it's coming back a full circle. What happened with this, why finally, when he's getting close to his son, and when finally he has some, he's giving him the time and attention he deserves, his son is not well. So it's kind of what happened with his wife. So he's again in that situation and he can't bear it. And Mammootty, when he starts breaking down and crying at the same, because Dr. Gorman, who Suresh Gopi, who plays his friend is the one who tells him, and they have to arrange for emergency surgery. But then, I believe the surgery is to be done by another doctor, so it'll take some time. So it's one night at the hospital, and there's a scene where he sort of comes to the hospital because he doesn't know what happened to his son. So he goes out and he comes back, and I think with it's a bag of fruits or something, like an apple, orange, or something like that. And Dr. Gorman says, tells him there's something wrong. We need to have an emergency surgery. The first thing that happens is the fruits in his hand. I think it's a paper bag or something like that. The fruits start falling one by one because he can't take it, and it kind of slips, and one fruit falls down. And Mammootty, in that shock, kind of looks down and he sees this fruit. He bends down to pick it up, and the other fruits start falling down. And then Dr. Govind comes in and he sort of helps pick up the fruits, but that's not really it. It's for him at that point. Mammootty is sort of looking for a distraction because he's processing the information, and he's sort of finding it difficult to take it. But then he doesn't tell his son, so he's kind of acting like he's happy and he's cheerful in front of his son. Then he comes out of the room and he's crying. Oh my god, as a viewer, you can't take it. It's just so emotional. And then, like I said, it leads to the song Snehathin Poonjala, where he's carrying his son in his arm and he's singing it. I still have that visual in my head. It's a great song. It's incredibly tragic, but it's also incredibly touching, that song and how it's picturized. And he's, because he has just one night, he's basically taking him out for ice cream. They go and watch a movie together, and he's basically going to, I think he goes to a temple to pray. So all of this is happening, because he's not sure he's going to, if his son will survive the night, or survive post the surgery. All of this very painful, very difficult to watch, but again, it's incredible drama, performed really well. Mammootty, like I said, it's in my book, it's one of my favorite Mammootty performances. And finally, you have a wonderful ending. It's very subtle, it's very subjective, but at the same time, it's not exactly confusing. Also, Mammootty and the nanny and his son, they get on a boat, and it's night, right? So they go for a boat ride. And at the same time, Mammootty is trying to control his tears and not to let his son know something would happen to him. And at that point, we see it's sort of like the boy is hallucinating because he's in a lot of pain. The surgery is supposed to take place in the morning, so he's in a lot of pain and he's sleeping. I think he's on his shoulders at that point, and he's sort of looking out into the lake, and he sees his mother, Shobana, right? She's walking on the lake and she's coming towards him, and she's singing a song that I think that song was right there in the beginning of the movie as well. So she's singing to him, and she's extending her arm, and he's telling his father, I can see my mom, she's calling me. And Mammootty is doing his best not to break down, and he's holding on to his son as tight as he can because he can't let him go. And it's sort of the director is sort of communicating the stories that he might not make it, so his mother is here to take him with her. But then there's an interesting little change in the scenery where the mother looks at his father, Balu. She looks at the nanny, who's sort of she sort of likes Mammootty's characters also. So it's almost hinted that they could have a future together. So she sees that, and she sees the boy in between them, and she sees that they could be a family at some point. At least that's what she sees over there, and therefore she sees, and she tearfully says, turns away, and she walks again on the lake away from the boat, and the boy says, mom is leaving, and it's sort of communicating to us that the boy will survive. Again, it's left open-ended, but I believe subjectively speaking that's what they intended. So a great movie and a wonderful father role by Mammootty. So that's number 3 in my top 5 father roles in Malayalam movies. Number 2 on my list is Chako Mash from the movie Spadigam, released in 1995, written and directed by Badran. Telugu has probably done the most number of father roles, or the most impactful father roles in Malayalam cinema. He's done father roles for Mammootty, Mohanlal, Dileep, Suresh Gopi, Jayaram, Kanjaka Bhavan, you name it, every actor. And so needless to say, any father role that you give him, he knocks it out of the park. And the character of Chako Mash will be remembered in perpetuity. There's no doubt about it. In fact, the writer-director Badran said the character of Chako Mash and Adudoma, played by Mohanlal also, they were actually based of certain real people. And you can see it also in the screenplay and how the characters appear on screen. It feels like they have a life to them. It's not just just cinematic or dramatic, whatever you see on screen. It feels like these are real characters, and the dynamic between the character of Adudoma and Chako Mash, it feels extremely real. There are moments of heartbreak, there are moments of tension, there are moments of drama. The story itself is based entirely on the dynamic between the father and the son. So it was very, very important that part of the movie had to work. That's the heart of the movie. If that doesn't work, nothing else works in this movie. But in this movie, that works to perfection, and everything else falls into place. Great performances by Telugu and Mohanlal in their respective roles. The story of Chako Mash is basically the story of a disappointed father. He's a celebrated and awarded mathematician who is greatly respected by everyone within the village that he's in. In fact, Telugu's character in this movie is actually received an award from the president. That's how acclaimed and celebrated he is as a mathematician. And his son, on the other hand, played by Mohanlal, he is basically a rowdy. He's a goon or a gunda, whatever you want to call it. So his son is a matter of great disappointment and shame to him. He's such an acclaimed and admired mathematician, and yet he couldn't do or help his son achieve anything in his life. And now on top of that, Mohanlal's character Adudoma had a special talent for inventing or fixing things. But Chako Mash could only see his son wasting his time, and therefore he couldn't accept that his son's area of interest, which is fixing things and inventing things, was good enough. So he was extremely harsh in how he kind of brought up his son. He was extremely critical, to the point where his son finally runs away from home. And when he runs away, he's got nowhere else to go, and he decides to become a rowdy of sorts, where he's beating up people for money, and he kind of he kind of becomes popular and famous, and he throws away his name. His name is Thomas, which he throws away and becomes Adudoma. Spadigam, of course, was a big blockbuster, a very, very memorable movie in every sense of the way. Along with Chako Mash, every character in that movie will be remembered in perpetuity, because it's just that kind of a movie. It's an ultimate classic. It's a blockbuster, and on one hand, it can be seen as an action drama, but like I said, at the core of it, it's a father-son movie. Certainly a memorable movie and a very memorable father role in Malayalam cinema. And the number one on my list is Achudan Nair, played again by Thilagan, in the movie Kireedam, released in 1989, directed by C.B. Malayal, written by A.K. Lohidas. Now, what can I say about this movie that hasn't been said? It's not only a blockbuster or a classic, it's an absolute gem. Not just from Malayalam film industry, but the Indian film industry. Now, coming back to the father role of Achudan Nair, again played by Thilagan, to perfection. The dynamic again between Mohanlal and Thilagan in this movie. If Spadigam was good, definitely, but Spadigam is only number 2 on my list, because this is the perfect father-son role in Malayalam cinema, in my opinion. And I don't say that lightly. I'm aware of how good, the number of movies that are out there, the father roles done by various actors. I'm aware of it, and I fully respect it. But in my opinion, I have not seen this level of natural chemistry between two actors who have played father-son in any movie I've seen to this date. Not just in Malayalam, I'm talking about English, Hindi, Tamil, whichever movie you want to say. And I'm sure you have your own opinions as well. I'm just sharing mine. But everything really works in this movie. In the beginning of this movie, Achudan Nair, he sort of has a dream where his son, played by Mohanlal, who, he's a head constable, and his son comes to the police station in the outfit of sub-inspector, and his father sees that and he salutes him, and he's very proud, and he sort of sees that dream and he wakes up, and and I think there's an old saying, okay, whatever dream you see in the morning, that dream will happen, and I think he addresses that in the beginning of the movie. Unfortunately, this movie is a tragedy. That's where it's leading to. It's one of the few I generally dislike tragedies. I really do. But this is one of the movies where I absolutely agree that it has to be a tragedy. It cannot go in any other way. This movie also had a sequel, Chengul. I have my criticism when it comes to Chengul. And like I said, when it comes to the tragedy over there, it absolutely makes sense, because I've seen this movie over 10 times at least. And every time when I get to the climax, it's not just it's sad or it's it makes you cry. That's a different matter. It's just that every time I get to that end, the shock of it all is still there. It doesn't matter how many times I see it. Every time when I get to the end, how this the story started, like I said in the beginning, the positivity and the lightness of it, and the enthusiasm the father has after seeing this dream, and the way the sort of the graph of the movie goes to the right until the very end, that shock and of the shock of how it all ends, and the tragedy, it still has an impact on you when you watch it. And it's a movie that works on so many different levels. And the father role, like I said, this is another movie where the dynamic between the father and the son had to work for everything else to fall into place, and it works in this movie. Off the top of my head, I can think of at least 10 different scenes in this movie where Mohanlal and Tilagan just knocks it out of the park. For instance, when Mohanlal is sort of arrested for beating up a bad guy and breaking his arms. Because Tilagan's is head constable, right? The other police, they bring him in, but they don't hurt him or anything, because it's Tilagan's son. But Tilagan comes in, he's absolutely disappointed and enraged, and he starts beating up his son in jail. And it finally takes the sub-inspector played by Murali to kind of come in and pull him off his son, and he says, if he dies in this, I have to be answerable. And then he stops. And his son, after getting beaten up so much, and he's sitting in the jail, so he's sad, he's hurt. Tilagan, his father, comes back with with a parcel of sorts with food, and he comes there and he opens the parcel and he tells his son to eat. It's just so touching. I think I'm getting a little emotional talking about it. There's also a very interesting scene in the beginning where his son, like I said, he's training to be a police officer. He's written the exam and everything. And I believe there's a physical test also. So his father sort of comments that he needs to reduce weight a bit. So Mohanlal's character, when he's at home, he in the morning he's having breakfast and he says, oh, I only want this much, not too much, and he tells his mother. And after that he sort of goes to his I believe to his uncle's house, and his grandmother is there, and she gives him extra food and he starts eating. And incidentally, his father also turns up at the uncle's house for something, and he basically sees his father and he feels embarrassed, and his father then quickly tells him, hey, if you feel hungry, eat at home, don't worry about the diet. Very, very touching. There's also another scene where his father doesn't have a lot of money, like I said, he's a head constable, right? But his son has to go for an exam or something, and he's at the bus stop, and his father comes to see him off, and he immediately pulls out all the money he has in hand and he gives it to him. Take this, go home, go write your test. There's so many. What do you say? It feels very real, very grounded. Everything that you see here, nothing feels exaggerated. Mohanlal plays the character of Sethu Madhavan, who kind of gets entangled with a rowdy or a goon of sorts, and he's sort of very influential and very rich as well. And he's, I believe he's 6'4", 6'3". The character is called Kirikadan Jose, played by Mohan Raj, who did not have a lot of experience. So when they had those fight scenes, his timing was off, and he often accidentally ended up hitting Mohanlal for real. But anyway, the story goes that Kirikaran Jose gets into a fight with his father. As a cop, you have to deal with certain situations, and that it was just routine police situation. But when Sethumadhan again sees his father getting beaten up, he intervenes and he accidentally ends up knocking out the biggest and baddest goon in that area. So everyone sort of sees him as a savior figure of sorts, and immediately they look at him as another upcoming rowdy or a bad guy or whatever they want to call him. But at the same time, they all sort of rally behind him because Kirikaran Jose was sort of a dictator who kind of established control over everyone. So they saw Sethumadhan as the guy who could kind of defeat him, and therefore they start kind of basically it's just the people of that village sort of talking about Sethumadhan as a upcoming rowdy or a villain, and they sort of built up his legend of sorts, and he starts losing his reputation, and he starts building a reputation as a bad guy, even though he's not that guy. He doesn't want to be that guy, and as a result of which other bad guys also get involved and want to fight him, and accidentally he kind of turns into that guy, or at least the reputation by the people around him. That's how they started talking about him. That's how they see him, and he can't change. It's sort of the society reacting to a situation. It's incredibly tragic. At the same time, there's a sort of helpless nature to how the story and characters are developing. And Achyutan Nair, this father and who loved his son, he's starting to feel like he's losing his son, and there's a lot of disappointment, there's a lot of pain, and as the story goes on, finally in the end, Mohanlal's character Sethumadhan is left with no choice but to kill Kirikaran Jose, because he was beaten. He sort of takes an oath that the only way to reclaim his title, or Kireedam, the name of the movie is crown, Kireedam, which means crown. The only way to reclaim that is to beat him. And so in the climax again, they have a brutal street fight of sorts, and in the end Sethumadhan ends up killing him, which his father witnesses. And at that moment, Mohanlal's again acting over here, it's just a whole other level. It's really, really unfortunate that we haven't really seen that. If you look in the last 10-15 years, we haven't really seen that Mohanlal, the kind of performance he used to give. We just haven't seen that. I think it's a great loss of sorts, because definitely, when I look back, even today, if you watch this movie and if you look at that performance, it still holds up. Mohanlal at that point, he kind of becomes insane, where he's holding a knife in his hand and he's not allowing anyone to get close. He's sort of threatening them, and then his father comes and there's an iconic dialogue exchange where say, "This, I'm your father and I'm telling you to put the knife down," and it has a lot more impact in Malayalam. But extremely sad, extremely tearful when you watch it. You can't help yourself but cry a little. It's sort of situation getting out of hand. And at that point, Mohanlal's character Sethumadhan is almost at the brink of insanity, and when his father calls him, "This is your dad, I'm telling you to put the knife down," at that point, Mohanlal sort of comes back to sort of reality, and he snaps back into reality, and he's able to look at his father, and he drops the knife, breaks down in tears, falls to his knees, and he cries. Police come and arrest him. Oh my God, what a movie. And in the end, at the very end, he gets the letter where it says that he is qualified for he's qualified for the police. He's passed the police examination and the physical test, and he's qualified to be sub-inspector of police. So the letter initially comes to the police department, I think the police station, wherein the sub-inspector opens the letter and he tells Tilagan, to which Tilagan replies, he's unqualified. Sethumadhan is now a notorious criminal. And it's so sad because his father is the one telling him that. In any way you look at it, this is the story of that movie. There's no other way you can end the movie. It cannot end in a happy ending. It's one of those movies I absolutely agree has to end in tragedy, because that's the story, that's the kind of characters. Wonderfully written, wonderfully performed by everyone. Achyutan Nair just I think this is the best father role in my opinion in Malayalam cinema, and Tilagan is just phenomenal in this role. So yes, that's my number one father role in Malayalam cinema, and that brings me to the end of my list. Share your comments below. I would love to hear your thoughts on this list. Of course, if you have your own favorite father roles in Malayalam cinema, please share them below. I would love to read them. So that's it, guys. That's the video. Once again, to all the fathers out there, wish you all a very happy Father's Day. To me, I see a father as a superhero, because for me, my father is my superhero, and he doesn't have a cape, he doesn't have superpowers, he doesn't beat up 100 bad guys, but he's always been there for me during my most difficult times in my life, and he's my pillar of support and strength. So I wouldn't be the man I am today without my dad. So to my father, I say, I love you from the bottom of my heart, and I wish you a very happy Father's Day. Thank you for everything you've done. You will always be my hero. So with that, I come to the end of the video, guys. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up icon, and of course, subscribe to my channel for more reviews and videos like this. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Bye.